G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. I'm here to talk to you this time about the idea of an optimal size for local government. Indeed, the idea goes all the way back to Plato, 2,500 years ago. Plato wrote this book called The Laws, and in the Laws he gave a description and detail of what was required to create a utopia. His utopia was called Magnesia. And one of the key things he focused on was the size of Magnesia. He said that it must have precisely 5,040 citizens because it was a convenient number, in his words. Now, if you're interested in mathematical facts, you'll know that 5,040 is a highly composite number. I think the only number that doesn't go into it up to 12 is 11. Now, that makes it administratively easy to work with. So he separated the community into little groups and sections, and doing so is easy when you've got a highly composite number. Aristotle, his student, the one in the light blue robe there, was much more down to earth. That's why he's pointing down in that picture. And he said, no, you can't just pin a number on local government and say what the optimal size of government is. You need to think about the capacity of the people, the needs of the people, and you need to think about community. The people need to know one another. They need to be able to get around the area and talk to one another. Because without community, all it is a group of people that happen to be in the same geographic location. Now, unfortunately, modern day public policy architects are absolutely fixated on population numbers, which means they haven't really progressed in 2,500 years. There's much more important criteria, which I'll go through now in order of my perception of their importance. The most important is homogeneity. When you have similar people of similar tastes, a number of things happen. First, as we know from the decentralization theorem, that when we have local government providing services to similar people of similar tastes, it's the most economically efficient way of doing things. It's easier for local government to perceive the precise level of services and goods that people want and not to over-provide or under-provide. It's also easier for local government to deliver those services because they'll know the cost, because it will be uniform, because it's the same people with similar tastes. But perhaps more importantly, is when you've got similar people with similar tastes, you get community. That's why people congregate together in groups in the first place. And the closer they are in taste and outlook, the stronger the community is likely to be. The next most important thing is fiscal equivalence. It's just fairness, essentially. It goes all the way back to at least Olson, this work. And basically, it says that the people who are generally using the local government services, day-to-day use, should be captured by the local government boundaries so that they're paying taxes towards that local government and therefore paying for what they use. I think that's fair and reasonable. Now, we're not talking about the person who might once every blue moon drive into another local government area. We're talking about regular use. So local government boundaries should capture the patterns of regular activity of the people who live there. If they don't, we have what's called free riding. We have people from other shires constantly using the services of another shire and not paying towards it, not paying any of the tax towards it. So they're free riding. They're getting benefits on the back of other people's sacrifice, which is just not fair. Efficiency. Now, this is the one that our local government architects keep focusing on. But if you watch my other videos, you know that they usually get it wrong. There's a thing called economies of scale, and the idea is that as output increases, costs should decrease. You eventually get to this optimal point, but if you go too far, unit costs will start increasing again. Now, if you can get a local government at optimal size, you'll have it at the services being provided at the most efficient price. Now, unfortunately, most functions don't actually have a U-shaped curve associated with them. the cost doesn't change as we change the output. So increasing council size isn't going to make any difference in those situations. The other problem, if you watch my other videos, is that different services have different optimal sizes. Now, the difficulty with that is when you amalgamate councils, you get just one size. Much better to do shared service collaborative arrangements, and you can mix and match with other partners to ensure that you're always close to the optimal size. But you've got to think about the slope of these curves too, and people often neglect that. If the curve is steep like this, yes, certainly big savings to be made by being efficient. However, if the curve is much flatter like this, is it really worth billions and billions of dollars to save a fraction of a cent per unit cost? It costs money to amalgamate, and if there's not significant gains to be made, that's a bad investment. We also need to remember, as I discussed in a paper at Local Government Studies a few years ago, that the purpose of government is not efficiency. That's not why we have local government. We have local government to foster the common good. We're concerned about things like democracy, transparency, accountability, responsiveness. The word efficiency doesn't pop into my head when I think of government. For many decades, economists have been consistent in saying if you want the most efficient allocation of resources, you go to the private market. But we don't go to the private market for a whole heap of things. We need government because the private market would just ignore us. They wouldn't provide public goods and services because they can't get any revenue out of doing so. So we need to be careful that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. Efficiency is important. No one wants a terribly inefficient government, but usually the gains in efficiency are rather minuscule, and if it comes at the cost of democracy or voice or accountability or responsiveness, it's just not worth the cost to most people. And adequate capacity. This is a new one that's been introduced by public policy architects of late. It refers to the idea, would a bigger government have more capacity? Would they have more staff? Would they be likely to attract more experienced staff? Yes, probably. But these are all things that can also be dealt with through shared services, through contracting, through careful recruitment and training. It is important to have adequate capacity, but once again, it's right down the bottom of my list. The most important thing to me, and I suggest to the most citizens, is that local government is a moral endeavour. So that means that we do have the fiscal equivalence happening, that we do have homogeneity happening so that similar people can have their tastes responded to and make constitutions that suit their needs, which is precisely what Aristotle said thousands of years ago. So in conclusion, there is no single optimal size for local government. It's a mirage. It doesn't exist. Each local government needs to be organised, and its boundaries need to be designed so that they capture those four things. And the most important of that is homogeneity. The next most important, and only closely behind, is fiscal equivalent. Then way down the list we start thinking about things like efficiency and adequate capacity. Efficiency is just one of those four important factors, and it's by no means the most important. I could almost have put it down on the bottom of the list. It's a long way behind the others. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, please subscribe, please give it the thumbs up, and most importantly, tell your colleagues. The whole point of this channel is to get good information out to decision makers so that they can help their communities. I can't do that without your help. I need you to flick the link to my YouTube station off to your mates and let them know that this is a useful resource. Now, also, please don't forget, the book Saving Local Government comes out January next year. It was written specifically for you guys. Now, I think it's rather expensive. that's up to my publisher. I personally get nothing out of selling this. I'm not trying to get a commission or something like this. I want people to buy the book because it was written for you guys, and it's written for you guys so that you can help your community. So the more books I can get into the hands of decision makers, the better off we will all be. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.